I cried the first time I saw her in the mirror, and that woman was me. I want to start there because that is the moment my life finally split into a clean before and after, even though the truth is that nothing about me was new that night. Everything that surfaced in the glass had already been living inside me for 31 years, hiding in the small private rooms of my chest, waiting for someone to finally open the door and say, "You can come out now, it is safe. Nobody is going to laugh at you anymore." But before I tell you about that night, I have to tell you about the boy I was supposed to be, because you cannot understand the tears in that mirror without first understanding the silence that came before them. My name on my birth certificate is one I do not say out loud anymore, not because I hate the boy who carried it, but because that name belonged to a costume, and the costume got so heavy I could barely stand up under it by the end. I was the oldest of three, raised in a small town in the middle of nowhere, the kind of place where the church and the football field were the two cathedrals, and everyone knew which one you belonged to by the way you walked. My father was a quiet man who worked with his hands and believed that feelings were something you swallowed the way you swallowed bitter medicine, quickly and without complaint. My mother was softer, a woman who loved me in the way mothers love sons they do not quite understand, with worried eyes and second helpings of food and prayers whispered over my forehead when she thought I was sleeping. I think she always knew. I think mothers always know, even when they cannot put it into words, even when they spend years pretending the knowing is something else. The first time I remember wanting to be a girl, I was maybe 4 or 5 years old. My cousin Marisol was visiting, and she had this dress, a yellow sundress with tiny white flowers stitched along the hem, and when she twirled in our backyard, the dress lifted up like the petals of a flower opening to the sun. I remember standing there in my little boy shorts and my little boy shirt and feeling a hunger I did not have the language for. I wanted to be inside that dress. I wanted to spin and feel the fabric move around my legs. I wanted to be the flower, and not the dirt the flower grew out of. That night I asked my mother if I could have a dress too, just one, just to try, and she laughed in the way grown-ups laugh when children say something they think is adorable and harmless, and she said, "Sweetheart, boys do not wear dresses," and that was the first lock that ever clicked shut inside me. I did not cry. I just nodded and tucked the wanting away into a small drawer behind my ribs, and I would spend the next 26 years putting things into that drawer and pretending I could not hear them rustling around in there at night. Childhood, when you are a boy who is not quite a boy, is an exhausting performance. You learn early which gestures get you punished and which ones get you praised, and you adjust accordingly. I learned not to cross my legs the way I wanted to. I learned not to let my wrists go soft when I held a cup. I learned that the way I laughed could betray me, that I had to flatten the music out of my voice before it left my mouth. I learned to play the games the other boys played, to pretend I cared about the scores, to slap shoulders and grunt instead of speaking when speaking would give me away. I was a good actor. I think I was such a good actor that for long stretches of time, I even fooled myself, convinced myself that the wanting was just a phase, just a strange flicker that would pass when I got older, when I discovered girls in the way I was supposed to discover them. But the wanting did not pass. It only got quieter. It went underground and built rooms down there. When I was 8, I snuck into my mother's closet for the first time. I remember the smell most of all, the soft powdery perfume she wore on Sundays mixed with the faint laundered scent of her blouses. I touched her dresses with the tips of my fingers like I was touching something holy. There was one I loved especially, a soft blue thing with a tied waist, and I took it down from the hanger and held it up against my body in front of her mirror. I did not put it on. I did not dare. But I stood there for what must have been only a minute and felt a peace I had never felt anywhere else, in any other room of my life. Then I heard a car door outside, and I hung it back up so quickly I almost tore the sleeve, and I ran out of that closet with my heart beating in my throat like a trapped bird. I felt ashamed. I felt thrilled. I felt seen by myself for the first time, and the seeing terrified me because if I could see me, what was stopping anyone else from seeing me too? The teenage years were the worst. Puberty did not feel like a gift the way they told us it would. It felt like a slow betrayal, my body becoming a stranger I had not agreed to live inside. I watched my shoulders get wider and my jaw get harder and the hair start coming in on my chest and my arms, and every change felt like another nail in the lid of a coffin I was being buried alive in. The other boys celebrated these things. They compared, they bragged, They grew into themselves with what looked to me like joy. I grew into myself with grief, although I could not have named it grief at the time. I just knew that I cried in the shower a lot, and I could not have told you why if you had asked. I would press my palms over my chest and wish, in a way that felt almost prayer-shaped, that something different would grow there instead. I would look at the girls in my class and feel two things at once that I could not reconcile, a kind of admiration so deep it sometimes felt like love, and a kind of envy so deep it sometimes felt like dying. I wanted to be near them, and I wanted to be them, and for the longest time I could only let myself feel the first one, because the second one was the kind of feeling that got boys hurt where I came from. I had a girlfriend in high school. Her name was Anna, and she was patient and kind, and she deserved a fuller version of me than I was able to give her. We dated for almost 2 years, and I tried so hard to want her the way the other boys wanted their girlfriends, with that hungry, urgent simplicity I saw in them. What I felt instead was tenderness and curiosity, and a strange ache that I now understand was something like longing to switch places with her. When she would put on her makeup before our dates, I would sit on the edge of her bed and watch her, and she thought I was being romantic, attentive, the kind of boyfriend who paid attention to the small rituals of her life.
I was, in a way, but I was also memorizing.
I was watching the way she pressed the powder into her skin and rolled the mascara up her lashes, and I was filing it away into that drawer behind my ribs that was getting heavier and heavier every year. When she broke up with me, gently, the summer before college, she said something I have never forgotten. She said, "You are always somewhere else, even when you are right here, and I do not think it is another girl, I think it is something else, and I hope one day you find whatever it is." I drove home that night and sat in my car in the driveway for an hour and cried in a way I had not cried since I was a child. I think I was crying because she had seen the door I had been pretending was a wall. College was where I started to live a second life in secret. I was alone for the first time, no parents in the next room, no siblings barging in. I had a dorm and then later a small apartment with a door I could lock, and behind that locked door I began, very carefully, very privately, to let pieces of her out. The first thing I bought was a pair of women's socks. I know that sounds small. I know it sounds almost ridiculous. But standing in that store with that pack of soft pink ankle socks in my hand, I thought I was going to throw up from how scared I was. I went to the self-checkout. I would not have been able to hand them to another human being. I took them home and held them in my lap on the edge of my bed for almost an hour before I worked up the courage to put them on. And when I did, when I pulled those soft little socks up over my ankles and looked down at my feet, something in me broke open and something else in me healed, both at the same time, and I sat there on the edge of that bed and rocked back and forth and laughed and cried at once, because part of me was finally home, and part of me was terrified of what home was going to cost. After the socks came other things, slowly, over years. A pair of leggings I told myself were for sleeping in. A soft cotton camisole I told myself was just because it was comfortable. I would buy these things online late at night with my heart pounding, and I would hide them in the back of a drawer, underneath things no one would ever look through. I lived in that drawer. I lived for the nights I could be alone, when I could close the blinds and turn the lights low and put on the small soft secret pieces of her, and just exist for a little while as something closer to what I was. And then in the morning I would take them off and fold them away and put the boy back on like a uniform, and I would go to my classes and my jobs and my family dinners and my friend gatherings, and I would smile and joke and pass, until passing felt like a kind of slow drowning. I tried to bury her. More than once. I went through phases where I would gather up everything I had collected, every little secret garment, every cheap drugstore lipstick I had bought and never quite had the courage to wear, and I would throw it all into a trash bag and drive it to a dumpster across town so my own trash man would not see it. I would do this and feel a wild surge of relief, and I would promise myself that this was the last time, that I was going to be normal now, that I was going to be the man my father wanted, and the husband Anna had deserved, and the son my mother prayed for. And for a few weeks, sometimes a few months, I would hold the line. I would white-knuckle through the days and tell myself I was healed. And then one night, always the drawer behind my ribs would start rustling again, louder and louder, and I would find myself in another store in another town buying it all back, every last thing, sometimes more than I had thrown away, and the shame after those purchases was a different kind of shame, the shame of someone who has lost a war with themselves and does not even know what the war was about. I was 28 when I met someone who began to change the geometry of my secret life, although he did not know at the time what he was changing. His name was David, and he was a coworker, and he became my closest friend over the course of about 2 years. We would get coffee, we would talk about books, we would go to movies. There was nothing romantic between us, at least not in any way I let myself acknowledge. But David had a softness to him that I had not encountered in many men, a way of asking questions and actually waiting for the answer, a way of letting silence sit between us without rushing to fill it. One night, we were sitting on his apartment balcony, and he had had a couple of drinks, and I had had a couple of drinks, and he asked me, out of nowhere, "What is the thing about yourself that you have never told anyone?" He said it lightly, like a game, but his eyes when he looked at me were not playing a game. I looked at him for a long time. I felt the drawer behind my ribs rattling so hard I thought he could hear it. And I almost told him. I almost said the words out loud for the first time in my life. But at the last second I lost my nerve, and I said something about being afraid of failure, some safe, acceptable answer, and he nodded slowly, and I could see in his face that he knew it was not the real thing. He did not push. He just refilled my glass and changed the subject, and that small mercy from him, that refusal to drag the truth out of me before I was ready, is something I will carry with me until I die. I think the breaking point came a few months after that. I had just turned 31. I was sitting in my apartment one Sunday evening, and the light was that particular thin gold of late autumn, and I caught my reflection in the dark screen of my television, just the shape of me sitting there on the couch. And I had this thought, very quiet, very matter-of-fact, that I did not want to live like this anymore. It was not a thought about dying, exactly, although I will not pretend that those thoughts had not visited me over the years. It was more a thought about not being able to continue carrying the costume. It was a thought about how heavy 31 years of pretending is, and how I did not believe I could carry it for another 31. Something had to give. Something had to break. And in that golden light, alone on my couch, I made a decision that felt like both a beginning and a surrender. I decided that one time, just one time, I was going to do it properly. Not socks. Not a camisole under my clothes. The whole thing. I was going to see her, the woman who lived behind my ribs, and I was going to look her in the eye, and whatever happened after that would happen. It took me 3 weeks to prepare. I want you to understand how careful this was, how reverent, how terrified. I researched everything in private browser tabs that I closed obsessively. I learned about tucking, although I did not know the word for it at first, and how to find it through hours of searching the right way to ask. I learned about how to shape eyebrows without shaving them off entirely. I learned about foundation shades, and how to find one for skin like mine. I learned about wigs, the difference between synthetic and human hair, the way a good cap fits along the hairline. I bought everything in pieces from different stores, paid in cash where I could, had things delivered to a parcel locker so the boxes would not stack up at my apartment. I chose an outfit slowly, the way you might choose what to wear to the most important day of your life, which I suppose is what it was. A long-sleeved black dress, simple, with a soft scoop neckline. A pair of black tights. A pair of low heels I practiced walking in for a week on my carpet because I was terrified of falling. Earrings, small ones, modest. A necklace with a thin gold chain. The night I had planned for came on a Friday in late November. I had told my friends I was sick and could not come out. I had told my family I was working late on a project. I had unplugged my doorbell. I had drawn every curtain in my apartment. I lit a single candle on the bathroom counter, not for any spiritual reason, just because the harsh overhead light felt too much like an interrogation, and I wanted softness for what I was about to do. I started in the shower. I shaved my legs for the first time in my life, and I cannot describe to you what it felt like to run my hand up my own calf afterwards and feel that smoothness. I shaved my chest, my arms. I scrubbed my face. I stepped out of the shower and stood in front of the foggy mirror and saw a body I almost recognized, a body that had been waiting underneath the old one all along. Then came the long, careful hours. I put on the things I had bought. I tucked, awkwardly, painfully, with shaking hands, watching a tutorial paused on my phone. I put on the tights and felt them smooth up my legs, and I had to sit down for a moment because my knees were trembling. I put on the dress and zipped it up the side and felt the fabric settle against my waist and my hips, and the fit was not perfect. My shoulders were a little too wide, and my hips were a little too narrow, but it was the most beautiful imperfection I had ever worn. Then the makeup, slow, fumbling, redoing the eyeliner 3 times because my hand kept shaking. The foundation, the blush, a soft pink lipstick. The wig, settled carefully over the cap. I had pinned my own hair under, brushed out, adjusted again. The earrings, the necklace, the small spritz of a perfume I had bought because the woman at the counter, when I had told her it was a gift for my sister, had said it smelled like a quiet evening in spring. And then, finally, I stood up from the edge of the bathtub where I had been doing all of this, and I walked the 4 steps to the full-length mirror on the back of my bedroom door, and I made myself look up. I cried the first time I saw her in the mirror, and that woman was me. I do not know how long I stood there. It could have been 1 minute or 30. Time fell away. What I remember is that the woman in the mirror raised her hand when I raised mine, and turned her head when I turned mine, and I understood, with a knowing that went deeper than any thought I had ever had, that she was not a costume. She was not a fantasy. She was not a phase. She was me.
She had always been me.
The boy in all those photographs on my mother's mantelpiece was the costume. He was the long performance. And she, this woman standing in the soft candlelight with tears running tracks through her careful makeup, was what had been waiting underneath the performance the whole time. I touched my own face in the mirror. I touched my own hair. I whispered, "Hello, you," and the woman in the mirror whispered it back, and we stood there together and cried for the 31 years it had taken us to meet. I want to tell you that everything got easier after that night, but life is not that kind of story. What I will tell you is that everything got truer, and truer is not always the same as easier, but it is always, always better. I did not come out the next day. I did not even come out the next month. I lived for almost a year with her as my secret, and during that year I let her out more and more often in small ways at first, then in larger ones. I would dress on weekends, when I had nowhere to be. I would practice my voice, gently, in the privacy of my car, finding the place in my throat where she lived. I started taking little walks late at night, around my own block, in flats and a long coat and the wig, just to feel what it was to exist in the world as her, even for 10 minutes, even with no one around to see. I would come home from those walks shaking and exhilarated, and alive in a way I did not know I was capable of being. The first person I told was David. Of course it was David. I owed it to him for that night on the balcony when he had given me the gift of not pushing. We were at his apartment again, a year almost to the day from that first conversation, and I had brought a bottle of wine, and I had been rehearsing in the bathroom mirror for an hour before I came over. I sat down across from him, and I said, "Do you remember when you asked me what I had never told anyone?" And his face changed very slightly, and he said, "I remember." And I said, "I am ready to answer." And then I told him everything, in a voice that wobbled the whole way through, and at some point I started crying and I could not stop, and at some point he reached across the table and held my hand, just held it, and when I was finally finished and looked up at him expecting I do not know what, disgust, pity, distance, he said something very simple. He said, "Thank you for trusting me." And then he said, "What do you need from me now?" Those 2 questions, those 2 sentences, are the kindest things anyone had ever said to me up to that point in my life, and I think about them still. David is the one who came with me, weeks later, to buy my first dress in person at an actual store, in daylight, as myself. I was so frightened I almost turned around 3 times in the parking lot. He walked beside me into that store, and he did not make a big deal of it, and he did not make a small deal of it. He just walked beside me, and when the saleswoman approached, he stepped back and let me speak. I told her, in a voice barely above a whisper, that I was looking for something for myself, and I watched her face for the flicker, the judgment, the recoil. It did not come. She just smiled and said, "What kind of occasion?" And I said, "Just for me, just to feel pretty." And she said, "Those are the best occasions, follow me." I bought a soft green dress that day. I wore it home in the car. David drove because my hands were shaking too much to be safe on the road, and we did not say much. We just listened to the radio, and I kept catching my own reflection in the side window and smiling at her like she was a friend I had not seen in years. Telling my family was harder. It took me almost another year to work up to it, and the conversations were not easy, and they were not all good. My father did not speak to me for almost 6 months. He did not yell. He did not say anything cruel. He simply went quiet in the way he had always gone quiet when something hurt him that he did not have the vocabulary for. My mother cried, but she cried in a different way than I had feared. She cried and held my face in her hands and said, "I think I have always known, baby. I just did not know how to ask you about it. I am so sorry I did not know how to ask." And then she said the words I had not let myself dream of hearing. She said, "You are still my child. You are still my child." My younger sister was the easiest. She just hugged me and told me she had a lot of clothes I could borrow and that she wanted to do my makeup sometime. My brother took longer, but he came around in his own quiet way, the same quiet way as our father. My father, in the end, came back. It was almost a year after I had told him. He showed up at my apartment one Sunday afternoon unannounced, holding a small wrapped package. He stood in my doorway and he looked at me, really looked at me, the soft sweater, the longer hair I had been growing out, the small earrings, and his eyes filled up and he handed me the package and he said, "Your mother helped me pick this. I do not know if it is right. I do not know any of this, but you are my child, and I am tired of missing you." Inside the package was a delicate silver bracelet. He fastened it on my wrist himself, his big work-worn hands trembling, and we did not say anything else for a long time. We just sat at my kitchen table and drank the coffee I made him, and that was its own kind of homecoming. I started hormones about 2 years after that night in the mirror. I will not go into the medical details, because that is not the heart of the story. The heart of this story is the slow and astonishing experience of watching my body, finally, begin to agree with me. I would catch glimpses of myself in store windows and have to stop, because the silhouette had softened. The face in the glass was rounding into something that matched the face I had been seeing in my mind since I was 4 years old. I cried a lot in that first year of transition, but it was a different kind of crying. It was not the crying of someone drowning. It was the crying of someone who has finally come up for air. I am 36 now. I am writing this on a quiet afternoon in early autumn, in the apartment I have lived in for 6 years, the same apartment where I first stood in front of that mirror. The mirror is still there. I look at her in it every morning when I do my makeup for work, and she is older now. There are small lines around her eyes. Her hair is longer and her own. Her hips have settled into themselves. The costume is gone, and the woman has stayed. I work at a job where my colleagues only know me as her. I have a partner who loves me, a kind person who came into my life 2 years ago and who has never once made me feel like a project or a curiosity. Only a person, only a woman, only the someone they chose. My mother calls me by my name, my real name, the one I chose for myself, and she says it the way she used to say my baby name when I was small, like it is the most natural word in her mouth. My father is teaching me to garden. He says it is something he wishes he had taught me sooner, and I do not correct him. I do not tell him that he could not have taught me sooner because there was no me to teach, there was only the costume, and the costume would not have known how to hold a trowel. If you are reading this and you are still in the drawer behind your own ribs, if there is a girl or a woman or a softer self inside you who is rustling and you cannot get her to be quiet, I want you to know something. I am not going to tell you that it is easy on the other side. I am not going to tell you that everyone will love you, or that the world will be kind, or that there will not be days when you grieve the version of yourself you were supposed to be. There will be days like that. There were days like that for me. But I am going to tell you that the woman in the mirror is real. She is not a fantasy, and she is not a sin, and she is not a phase, and she is not a mistake. She is the person who has been waiting for you to be brave enough to open the door. And when you finally do, when you finally light the candle and put on the dress and look up, you may cry the way I cried. You may cry for the years. You may cry for the boy who carried you so faithfully, even when he did not understand what he was carrying. You may cry because grief and joy can live in the same tear, and they often do. But you will also finally meet her. And she will raise her hand when you raise yours, and she will turn her head when you turn yours, and she will whisper hello back to you, and you will understand, the way I understood, that you were never broken. You were just folded up small inside someone else's idea of who you were supposed to be. And the unfolding, painful as it is the most beautiful work a person can do in one lifetime. I cried the first time I saw her in the mirror, and that woman was me. I have cried many times since for many reasons, but I have never again cried because I did not know who I was.
I know who I am now.
Her name is the name I gave myself on a quiet morning in spring, 2 years after that first night, when I finally felt ready to give myself something my parents had not been able to give me. I will not write the name here because some things are still mine alone, but I will tell you that it is a soft name, and it suits me, and when my mother says it now, it sounds like a prayer she has been practicing her whole life without knowing the words.
I am her.
I have always been her. And the mirror, that old mirror on the back of my bedroom door, is no longer a place of fear or a revelation.
It is just a mirror now.
It shows me my face in the morning and my face in the evening, and the face is mine, finally and fully and forever mine, and that is the quiet miracle I get to live inside every single day for the rest of my life. If you had told the boy I used to be that this is where his long performance would end, in this soft apartment with this soft light and this soft name and this soft woman looking back at him from the glass, I do not think he would have believed you. I do not think he would have dared. But I am here to tell him, across all the years, across all the locked drawers and the dumpsters and the lonely Friday nights, I am here to tell him that I made it. We made it. She and I and him. All the selves I have ever been. We made it home together. And home, it turns out, was never a place. It was a person. It was her.
It was me. It was always me.